It was a quiet evening, the kind that should have been ordinary but felt charged with an unspoken tension. I watched Huma in the bedroom mirror as she adjusted the strap of her dress, the soft lighting making her hair glow like strands of liquid chestnut. She looked beautiful, more beautiful than I could ever put into words. And yet, for reasons I couldn't comprehend, my heart felt heavier than it should. Tonight wasn't just any night. Huma was going on a date. Not with me. Not with anyone we both knew intimately. But with someone she had chosen carefully. Someone she hoped might bring her happiness in a way I couldn't. I had known about it for days. Yet when the moment came, I realized how unprepared I was to see her leave, even for something as simple as a dinner out. I forced a smile, the kind that hides a storm of emotions, and said, "Good luck tonight. I hope you have a wonderful time." My voice sounded steadier than I felt, but I could see her hesitate. Her smile was there, but it didn't reach her eyes, and for the briefest moment she froze, like she had just been struck by some invisible weight. That pause, silent and loaded, sent a ripple through me that I couldn't ignore. "Thanks," she murmured softly, but it lacked the warmth I had come to expect from her. Normally, her words would have been accompanied by laughter, a playful tease, or a reassuring touch. But tonight, there was only stillness. A quiet tension hung between us, heavy and suffocating, and I suddenly realized how little I truly knew what she was feeling. I wanted to ask her if everything was all right, to pull her close and hear her heart beat against mine, to reassure her, and maybe myself, that nothing was broken. But something held me back, a fear that pressing too hard might shatter the fragile barrier of civility and politeness she had built around her emotions. So I let her go, watching silently as she slipped her coat on and headed toward the door. The hallway light flickered as she left, leaving me alone in the living room, the silence pressing down like a tangible weight. I sank into the couch, running my hands through my hair, replaying her frozen expression in my mind. That brief hesitation had spoken volumes, more than words ever could. Something was different. Something was hidden. And I couldn't shake the feeling that by the time she returned, nothing would be the same. As I stared at the empty doorway, I realized that life, with all its ordinary routines, often carries moments that silently demand attention. Moments that force you to see, to feel, and sometimes to confront truths you'd rather avoid. Tonight, that moment had arrived. And somehow, I already knew that her silence would tell me more than I ever expected. The restaurant was quiet when Huma arrived, dimly lit with a soft glow of candlelight dancing across the tables. I couldn't see her, but I imagined her stepping inside, her usual elegance softened by nervous anticipation. Even from a distance, I could sense the energy of the evening, the way she carried herself, the subtle tension in her shoulders, and the way her eyes darted around the room, searching for something I couldn't identify. I stayed home, pacing the living room, my mind unwilling to rest. Every sound, whether the hum of traffic outside or the distant bark of a dog, made me flinch, as though it carried a secret message about her night. I thought about all the times we had shared laughter over dinners like this, our hands brushing across the table, our voices blending in conversation. And now, she was somewhere else, and I had no way of knowing what she was experiencing. I tried to distract myself. I poured a glass of wine, ran through emails, and even half-heartedly watched the news, but nothing could calm the whirlwind inside me. Each minute stretched endlessly, heavy with anticipation and unease. I replayed our earlier interaction over and over, the frozen smile, the hesitation in her voice. It was a small moment, almost insignificant, but it burned itself into my memory, refusing to fade. In my imagination, I watched her across the candlelit table, laughing politely at stories I couldn't hear, adjusting her hair nervously, glancing at her phone. I wondered if her date noticed the subtle flickers of hesitation in her eyes or the brief sighs that escaped her lips when she thought no one was watching. Was she enjoying herself, or was she silently wishing she were somewhere else? I remembered our first date years ago, and how easy it felt to be with her, how natural it was for her laughter to mix with mine, how her hand had fit perfectly in mine. And now, with her sitting somewhere else, sharing a table with someone new, I realized how fragile those moments had been, how quickly distance could sneak into the spaces we thought were safe. Hours felt like minutes, and minutes felt like hours. Each notification ping from my phone made my stomach twist with hope and disappointment. I want to call her, text her, hear her voice, but something told me I shouldn't intrude. Whatever she was experiencing tonight, it was hers alone to navigate. And then a thought struck me, a terrifying, unavoidable truth. That pause, that frozen expression before she left, had been a warning. Something was wrong, something unspoken, something that I was about to confront whether I wanted to or not. Tonight, I realized, was not just about a date. It was about discovering the hidden corners of Huma's heart, the parts she hadn't shared, and the silence that was about to speak louder than any words ever could. The moment I stepped out of the car, I felt my stomach twist into tight knots. My hands trembled slightly as I smoothed my dress, reminding myself that tonight was just a dinner, nothing more. Yet, every fiber of my being screamed otherwise. I wanted to smile, to laugh, to be the charming, confident woman everyone expected me to be, but the truth was, I felt anything but confident. I remembered the look on his face when he wished me well. His smile was so calm, so composed, and yet in his eyes there was something I couldn't ignore, something that made my chest tighten. I had frozen for a second, not because of guilt, exactly, but because that small moment had reminded me of all the things I hadn't shared, all the fears, all the insecurities, and the part of me that I kept hidden from him, even after all these years. As I walked into the restaurant, I tried to put on the mask I had perfected over the years, poised, polite, and in control. I greeted my date with a smile, but inside, my mind kept drifting back to him. What was he feeling? Was he thinking about me? Worried that I might be enjoying someone else's company more than I should? Was he replaying our interaction over and over, like I had done countless times in my own mind? I laughed at the small jokes my date made, nodded politely, and even tried to engage fully in the conversation. But my thoughts kept circling back to the pause in the living room, that fleeting hesitation I had tried to hide. I hadn't intended to frighten him or hurt him. I hadn't even realized I had frozen, caught between the thrill of the unknown and the comfort of the life I had already built. There was guilt, too, a soft, persistent guilt that gnawed at the edges of my mind. I had wanted to explore, to test the boundaries of my feelings, but I never expected the weight of that single, silent reaction to reach me even here. In the midst of laughter and polite conversation, I felt a heaviness, a quiet dread that tonight would change things, whether I was ready or not. Every glance at my phone brought a flicker of hope and terror. What if he called? What if he asked questions I wasn't ready to answer? My heart ached with longing for his understanding, for the reassurance I could no longer give him in that moment. The silence we shared had spoken louder than words, and now I realized I couldn't outrun it. As the dinner continued, I forced myself to focus, to pretend that everything was fine, but beneath the polite smiles and careful conversation, my mind was consumed by a single truth. No matter what happened tonight, that frozen moment would follow me. His gaze, his smile, the unspoken question lingering in the air. It was already rewriting the story of us. Tonight, I understood something I had long avoided. Silence could be louder than words, sharper than any confrontation, and infinitely more revealing. And as the minutes passed, I realized that the hardest part of this date wasn't the uncertainty, the new company, or even the fear of judgment. It was knowing that my silence had already told him everything he needed to know. Back at home, the apartment felt heavier than usual. Every ticking of the clock seemed louder, sharper, as if mocking my restless thoughts. I couldn't stop replaying her hesitation in my mind, the brief, frozen pause that had struck me like a sudden storm. What had it meant? Was it worry, guilt, fear, or something I couldn't even name? I tried to distract myself with mundane tasks, tidying the living room, checking emails, even rearranging books on the shelf. But each movement felt mechanical, my mind straying back to Huma, to the way her lips had barely moved when she said thanks, to the tension in her shoulders that she couldn't hide. The silence lingered like a shadow, stretching further with every minute she was gone. Then my phone buzzed. A message. My heart leaped and then faltered when I saw it. Her name flashed on the screen. I opened it with a mixture of hope and dread. "I'm okay." Just 2 words. No smiley face, no punctuation, no warmth. My chest tightened. Her brief, almost dismissive text mirrored the hesitation I had noticed before she left. I wanted to call her, to ask what she meant, to pull the truth from behind her silence, but a quiet voice in my head urged restraint. Sometimes, the more you press, the more the walls went up. I sat down on the couch, phone in hand, trying to read between the lines. But the silence she had left behind said more than any words ever could. Every pause, every evasion, every small hesitation, the cracks in her composure were screaming truths I wasn't ready to face. I remembered all the little signs I had ignored over the past few weeks. The distant looks, the sighs at the wrong moments, the tiny hesitations when I asked about her day. Maybe her silence tonight wasn't just about the date. It was about everything I had overlooked, every time I had assumed things were fine when they weren't. And then it hit me. Silence isn't always absence. Sometimes it's louder than any confession, any argument, any spoken truth. Tonight, her silence had spoken volumes. It wasn't anger, and it wasn't joy. It was something in between. Something raw, something unguarded. Something that told me I was standing on the edge of a revelation I wasn't prepared for. I put the phone down and stared at the wall. The shadows of the evening stretched across the room, and I felt a mix of fear, anticipation, and a strange, piercing clarity. Her silence wasn't just a mystery to solve. It was a mirror reflecting the fragility of what we had, the vulnerability we often ignored, and the honesty that could no longer be avoided. And in that heavy, quiet moment, I understood one undeniable truth. Tonight, silence would speak louder than words ever could, and I was about to hear everything. I couldn't sit still any longer. The silence was unbearable, pressing down on me like an invisible weight. I had tried to distract myself, tried to convince my mind that maybe everything was fine, but that frozen moment, her hesitant pause, wouldn't leave me alone. I needed to know. I had to. When Huma finally walked through the door, the room seemed darker than before, as if shadows had taken residence in the corners during her absence. She carried herself with an elegance that I had always admired, but her usual warmth seemed muted, held back by some invisible barrier. The air between us was thick, heavy, and impossible to ignore. "Hey!" I said, my voice steadier than I felt. She looked at me, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. Her eyes were wide, searching mine, but guarded. The silence was deafening, more eloquent than any words could ever be. Finally, she exhaled slowly, a small tremor in her lips betraying her attempt at composure. I didn't know how to tell you," she began, voice barely above a whisper. My chest tightened. "Tell me what?" I asked, trying to keep my tone calm, though every fiber of my body screamed in anticipation. She hesitated again, that same hesitation I had noticed before the date, that same pause that had haunted me all evening. Then she spoke, slowly, carefully, like each word was a fragile glass she feared would shatter under its own weight. I realized tonight that I've been avoiding something for a long time," she admitted. "I've been hiding part of myself, fears, doubts, things I didn't want you to see, because I was afraid they'd change how you feel about me." Her hand shook slightly as she spoke, but her eyes never left mine. I swallowed hard, trying to process the flood of emotions rushing through me. Fear, concern, love, an aching need to understand. "Huma, what are you saying?" I whispered. "I'm saying that your wish for me to have a good time tonight. It reminded me of how much I've been holding back," she confessed. "I wanted to explore, to feel something different, but the moment you smiled at me before I left, it made me realize that everything I've been searching for outside, I already have with you. And yet, I've been silent, distant, and maybe even a little selfish." Her words hit me like a wave, drowning me in emotion I hadn't fully prepared for. The frozen pause, the hesitation, the silence. It wasn't about someone else or betrayal. It was about fear, about vulnerability, and the unspoken truths that had been building between us for months. I felt a rush of relief and overwhelming love all at once. I stepped closer, taking her hands in mine, and whispered, "You don't have to hide from me. Never again. I want to know everything. Your fears, your doubts, even the parts of you you think I won't understand. That's what love is." Tears welled in her eyes, and she let out a small, shaky laugh. "I was so afraid of losing you tonight. Even though I didn't want to be anywhere else," she admitted. "Your silence before, your smile, it made me see myself and us more clearly than ever." And in that moment, the tension that had hung between us like a storm cloud finally lifted. The revelation wasn't just her truth. It was ours, shared and acknowledged, bridging the gap that silence had once widened. For the first time that night, I felt complete. The silence had spoken, yes, but now, words followed, healing the fragile spaces between us and reaffirming what I had always known. Love is strongest when honesty finally breaks through the quiet. The night stretched into quiet hours, yet the apartment no longer felt heavy. The tension that had clung to every corner seemed to have lifted, replaced by a fragile, tentative calm. Huma sat beside me on the couch, her hand in mine, fingers intertwined as if confirming that the bond between us was real, unbroken, and resilient. We didn't speak immediately. Words were unnecessary. The shared understanding between us was palpable, a soft hum of connection that had taken months of silence and fear to reach. In those quiet moments, I reflected on how easily misunderstandings could grow when left unspoken, and how dangerous silence could be allowed to dominate instead of dialogue. I thought back to her frozen hesitation before she left for the date, the pause that had haunted me, kept me awake, and made my heart ache. What I had initially feared as a sign of betrayal had instead been a silent cry for acknowledgement, a subtle request of me to notice, to care, to understand without judgment. It was a lesson I wouldn't forget, that emotions unvoiced to be louder than words, demanding attention in the quietest, most profound ways. We talked eventually, softly, deliberately, each word chosen with care. She shared her fears, the insecurity that she was enough, the anxiety of wanting to explore and grow while simultaneously fearing that it might hurt me. I shared mine. The worry of losing her, the uncertainty of interpreting the unsaid, and the deep, unwavering love that had anchored me through the storm of my imagination. It struck me then how much we had underestimated the power of honesty. How many small moments had we ignored? How many pauses, glances, and silences had been left unexplored, only to grow into something much larger than intended? The evening had become a mirror, reflecting not only our vulnerabilities, but also the strength of our connection, tested yet unwavering. In the days that followed, our relationship subtly shifted. There was an unspoken promise in every glance, every touch. We were more attuned to each other's hesitations, more aware of the need to communicate, more committed to sharing our fears before they grew into silence. The lessons of that night, how a single pause could carry so much meaning, how silence could reveal truths words sometimes could not, remain with us, quietly reshaping our bond. Looking back, I realize that love is not just in laughter or shared joy. It lives in the moments of tension, the pauses that feel like eternity, and the courage to confront what's difficult. It thrives in honesty, in vulnerability, and in the willingness to face the unknown together, even when fear threatens to pull you apart. Huma leaned her head against my shoulder, and I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in weeks. That night had been painful, yes, filled with uncertainty and unspoken fears, but it had also been transformative. We had survived the silence, listened to its message, and emerged stronger for it. Sometimes I think of that frozen moment before she left for her date, and I smile quietly to myself. What once seemed like a warning, a sign of danger, had turned out to be the very catalyst that strengthened our love. Silence had spoken, yes, but love finally had responded. And in the quiet aftermath, I understood something profound. The heart sees and hears what the mind often overlooks, and the courage to listen, truly listen, can change everything.